the invisible architect. I was always the reliable one, the steady one, the one who would figure it out, while my younger brother Jackson basked in the spotlight of our parents' undivided attention. My name is Daniel Reeves, and at 28, I'd spent the last decade of my life watching my parents pour their resources, pride, and dreams into my brother's baseball career, while I quietly put myself through architecture school by working construction during the day and waiting tables at night. Daniel, can you believe it? My mother's voice was breathless with excitement as she FaceTimed me from their luxury box at Truist Park in Atlanta. The Braves signed him for $3.2 million. Your brother is going to the majors. I squinted at my phone screen, trying to maintain my smile while standing in the sweltering Georgia heat at my construction site. Sweat dripped down my back as I watched my parents celebrating with champagne, my brother's beaming face filling the screen as he pushed between them. That's amazing, Jackson. Congratulations. I meant it despite everything. My brother had talent. What he didn't have was perspective. We're having a celebration dinner at Capitol Grill tonight, my father added, his arms slung around Jackson's shoulders. I know it's last minute, but you should join us if you can get off work. If I could get off work. As if my job building other people's dreams was something I could just walk away from at a moment's notice. As if the 3 jobs I was working to pay off my student loans while trying to launch my own architecture firm were just hobbies I dabbled in. I'll try, I said, knowing I wouldn't. The site manager was already signaling me to wrap up the call. I've got to go. Congratulations again, Jackson. I ended the call and shoved my phone back into my pocket, ignoring the immediate vibration of incoming texts. Probably my mother with details about the dinner I wouldn't be attending. Family emergency? Mike, my site manager, raised an eyebrow. Family celebration, I corrected, picking up my hard hat. My brother just signed with the Braves. Mike's eyes widened. No shit. Jackson Reeves is your brother? Man, I watched him play in college. Kid's got an arm like a cannon. Yeah, I nodded, heading back toward the half-finished apartment complex we were building. That's what everyone says. Later that night, I sat at my drafting table in my small apartment, working on designs for a sustainable community center I hoped would finally put my name on the map. My phone had been buzzing with notifications from my family's celebration dinner. Photos of champagne toasts, my brother signing memorabilia, my parents beaming with pride. I tried not to feel the sting. This was nothing new. When Jackson got a baseball scholarship to Vanderbilt, my parents threw him a party that cost more than my entire semester's tuition at Georgia Tech, which I was paying myself. When he was drafted into the minor leagues, they bought him a Range Rover. Meanwhile, I had taken the bus to my college graduation because no one had been available to drive me. Jackson had a tournament that weekend. I was used to being an afterthought in my own family's story. My phone rang again. This time it was Lisa, my girlfriend of 3 years. Hey, I answered, grateful for the distraction. How's the conference? Lisa was a structural engineer I'd met on a job site. She was currently at a green building conference in Seattle. Amazing. But that's not why I'm calling. I just saw the news about Jackson. Congratulations to your family. I sighed, pushing away from my drafting table. Thanks. They're pretty excited. And you? Lisa knew me too well. I'm happy for him. He's worked hard. But nothing. It's fine. It's just the same old story. Jackson shines, and I trailed off, unsure how to finish without sounding pathetically jealous. And you work yourself to exhaustion for a fraction of the recognition, Lisa finished for me. It's okay to acknowledge the inequality, Dan. It doesn't make you a bad brother. I walked to the window of my apartment, looking out at the Atlanta skyline. Somewhere across town, my family was celebrating as if they'd won the lottery. In a way, they had. Did I ever tell you what my dad said when I got accepted to Georgia Tech's architecture program? I asked, suddenly needing to share the memory. No, what? He said, that's nice, son, but don't those artsy degrees take forever? Jackson might go pro before you even finish school. Lisa was quiet for a moment. That's awful. The thing is, he wasn't trying to be cruel. In his mind, he was just stating facts. Baseball was real. Architecture was a hobby. And now? After you've designed award-winning sustainable structures? After your internship with Foster Plus Partners? After everything you've accomplished? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Now they're having a celebration dinner at Capitol Grill, and I'm drafting blueprints in my apartment. Daniel, Lisa's voice turned serious. When are you going to tell them about Horizon? The question hung in the air between us. Horizon Development Group was one of the largest eco-conscious development companies in the Southeast. 3 weeks ago, they had reached out about my community center design. Yesterday, they had offered me a partnership and a 7-figure contract to develop sustainable residential communities across 5 states. I hadn't told my family yet. I wasn't sure why. Soon, I said vaguely. It doesn't seem like the right time to steal Jackson's thunder. It's never the right time with your family, Dan. That's the problem. I knew she was right, but some habits were hard to break. The habit of making myself smaller to make room for Jackson's greatness was one I'd perfected over 2 decades. My phone buzzed with a text. My father. Wish you could have made it tonight, son. Jackson signed a ball for you. As if a signed baseball was what I needed from my family. I've got to go, I told Lisa. Early day tomorrow. Think about what I said, she urged. You deserve your moment too. After we hung up, I stared at my father's text for a long time before finally responding. Thanks. Big day for him. Then I returned to my drafting table, losing myself in the clean lines and sustainable innovations of my design. At least here, in the world I created on paper, everything made perfect sense. The family dinner happened 3 days later, not to celebrate my brother's signing, but to discuss it further, as if the first celebration hadn't been enough. This time, I couldn't avoid it. My mother had personally driven to my construction site to insist I attend. It's just that Jackson has some big decisions to make, she explained as I climbed into her Mercedes, still dusty from work. About investments, about where to live now that he has this contract. He values your opinion, Daniel. I doubted that. Jackson and I had barely spoken in months, despite living in the same city. But I nodded and buckled my seatbelt. I'll need to stop by my apartment to shower and change, I said, gesturing to my work clothes. My mother wrinkled her nose slightly. Of course, honey. We're meeting at Bacchanalia at 8. Bacchanalia. One of the most expensive restaurants in Atlanta. Of course. When I arrived at the restaurant, 15 minutes late because I'd had to take a call from Horizon about the contract, my family was already seated at a prime table, champagne flowing freely. There he is, Jackson called out, too loud for the elegant setting. He'd already had a few drinks. The mysterious older brother emerges from his cave of blueprints and whatever else you do. Construction management and sustainable design. I supplied automatically, taking the only empty seat. Congratulations again, Jackson. My father clapped a hand on my shoulder. We ordered you a whiskey. Neat, right? I was surprised he remembered. Thanks, Dad. So, my mother leaned forward eagerly. We've been discussing investment strategies for Jackson's signing bonus. Your father thinks real estate, but Jackson is interested in tech startups. And just like that, we were back to the Jackson show. I sipped my whiskey and listened as they debated the merits of various investment opportunities, tax strategies, and whether Jackson should buy or rent in Atlanta. What do you think, Daniel? My father finally asked, almost as an afterthought. You've always been good with money. Out of necessity, I thought but didn't say. Instead, I offered some practical advice about diversification and living below your means, even with a windfall. Jackson rolled his eyes. Always the cautious one. Come on, bro. If you suddenly had millions, what would you do with it? The question caught me off guard. What would I do? The Horizon partnership was substantial, but nowhere near the windfall Jackson was receiving. Still, it was the biggest opportunity of my career. I'd invest in sustainable development, I said honestly. Create communities that could change how people live, how they interact with their environment. My brother snorted. Boring. I'm thinking yacht. My mother patted his hand indulgently. Well, you've earned it, sweetheart. Had he? Had throwing a ball really fast earned him more than my years of education, apprenticeship, and grueling physical labor? I took another sip of whiskey, letting the burn distract me from thoughts that felt dangerously close to resentment. Actually, I said, setting down my glass, I have some news of my own. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me, expressions ranging from surprise, my father, to mild annoyance at the interruption, Jackson. I've been offered a partnership with Horizon Development Group. They want to implement my sustainable community designs across 5 states. Silence fell over the table. I watched as they processed this information, waiting for some sign of the pride and excitement they'd shown for Jackson. Isn't Horizon that hippy-dippy green company? Jackson finally asked. The one that builds those weird-looking houses. They're the leading sustainable development firm in the Southeast, I corrected. And they're offering me a 7-figure contract. My mother's eyebrows rose slightly. 7 figures? For drawings. For revolutionary architectural designs that will reshape residential living while significantly reducing environmental impact. I clarified, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. My father cleared his throat. Well, that's great, son. Very impressive. But his tone said otherwise. Very impressive for you. Not as impressive as a multi-million-dollar baseball contract, of course, but good for the reliable, unremarkable son. When did this happen? My mother asked. I got the official offer last week. I'm signing the contract tomorrow. Jackson frowned. And you're just telling us now? I told you guys about the Braves the minute my agent called. The irony was almost laughable. How many dinners had I sat through where my accomplishments weren't even worth a passing mention? I didn't want to distract from your big news, I said diplomatically. My father nodded appreciatively. Always consider it, Daniel. But this is wonderful news. We should order another bottle of champagne. He signaled the waiter, and just like that, my news was acknowledged and then neatly folded away. The conversation quickly returned to Jackson's contract, his potential move to a luxury high-rise, his endorsement opportunities. I finished my whiskey and declined a refill. As the evening wore on, I found myself studying my family as if they were strangers. My father, once a promising college athlete himself before an injury ended his career, living vicariously through Jackson's success. My mother, always drawn to glamour and status, basking in the reflected glory of having raised a professional athlete. And Jackson, my little brother, who had never known what it meant to be invisible within his own family. I excused myself early, citing an early meeting the next day. It wasn't a lie. I was meeting with Horizon's legal team at 7 a.m. to finalize the contract. Don't be a stranger, bro, Jackson called as I stood to leave. Once I get settled in my new place, you should come over. Bring that hot engineer girlfriend of yours. Her name is Lisa. I reminded him, though he'd met her multiple times. And thanks, I'll keep that in mind. My mother hugged me goodbye. We really are proud of you, Daniel, she whispered. This Horizon thing sounds wonderful. But her eyes were already drifting back to Jackson, who was regaling my father with stories about the Braves training facility. I walked out of the restaurant into the warm Atlanta night, a strange sense of resolution settling over me. I had spent my entire life waiting for my family to see me, really see me, to validate my choices, my hard work, my vision. But standing there on Peachtree Street, watching the city lights reflect off glass skyscrapers, some of which I had helped build, I realized something important. I didn't need their validation anymore. The Horizon contract signing was everything I had worked for. The company's sleek headquarters downtown buzzed with energy as I was introduced to the team I would be leading. My designs were displayed prominently in the conference room, and the CEO, Margaret Chin, spoke eloquently about how my vision aligned with Horizon's mission. Daniel Reeves represents the future of sustainable architecture, she told the assembled group. His community-centered design isn't just beautiful. It's revolutionary in its approach to energy consumption, community building, and environmental integration. We're not just signing a contract today. We're beginning a partnership that will change how Americans live. I felt a surge of pride as I signed the documents, making it official. This was my moment, earned through countless sleepless nights, years of education, and unwavering commitment to my vision. As we celebrated with coffee and pastries afterward, Horizon wasn't the champagne at breakfast type of company. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Jackson. Dude, you have to check out my ESPN interview. Link in the family group chat. They're calling me the future of baseball. I slipped my phone back into my pocket without responding. This was my day. For once, Jackson could wait. Margaret approached me, tablet in hand. Ready to see the sites we've selected for the first phase? I nodded eagerly, pushing thoughts of my brother aside. Absolutely. We spent the morning reviewing locations across Georgia, Tennessee, and North Carolina. Horizon wasn't just implementing my designs. They were giving me significant creative control and the resources to make my vision a reality. By lunchtime, we had established an ambitious timeline that would have the first community breaking ground in 3 months. This is just the beginning, Daniel, Margaret said as we wrapped up. If these first communities are successful, and I have every confidence they will be, we're looking at expanding nationwide within 5 years. I tried to process what she was saying. Nationwide. My designs changing the landscape of American living. It was more than I had ever dreamed possible. Thank you for this opportunity, I said, feeling inadequate in my gratitude. I won't let you down. Margaret smiled. I know you won't. That's why we chose you. Now go celebrate. This is a big day. As I left Horizon's offices, I called Lisa, who was flying back from Seattle that afternoon. It's official, I told her when she answered. I just signed. I knew you would, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I'm so proud of you, Dan. We're celebrating tonight. My treat. Actually, I said, an idea forming. I was thinking about hosting a dinner. At my apartment. Would you help me put something together? A dinner party? That doesn't sound like you. It's time for some changes, I said, feeling more certain with each word. I want to celebrate properly. With the people who matter. Of course I'll help. Who are you inviting? I hesitated only briefly. My family. Mike from the construction site. Professor Jenkins from Georgia Tech. And Margaret from Horizon if she's free. Lisa was quiet for a moment. Your family? Are you sure? I'm sure, I said firmly. It's time they see what I've built. Who I've become. After we hung up, I sent out the invitations by text. Simple and straightforward. Celebrating a new chapter. Dinner at my apartment, 7 p.m. tonight. My mother responded first. How lovely. Jackson has an interview with Sports Illustrated at 6, but we should be able to make it afterward. Of course they would. Some things never changed. But some things could change. Would change. Starting tonight. Underscore 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 underscore. Lisa arrived at 5 p.m. with groceries and determination. Together, we transformed my utilitarian apartment into something approaching elegant. Fresh flowers on the table. Candles. Wine breathing in decanters. The aroma of roasting chicken and vegetables filling the space. You know, Lisa said as she arranged a cheese board, you could afford a new place now. Something that showcases your aesthetic. I looked around my small apartment with its drafting table by the window, architectural books stacked on every surface, and walls covered in sketches and blueprints. I've been thinking about that. Not just a new apartment, but designing my own house. Something that embodies everything I believe about sustainable living. Lisa paused, a grape halfway to the cheese board. Your own house? Where? I shrugged. There's a beautiful piece of land outside the city, near the Chattahoochee River. I've had my eye on it for years. You never mentioned that. Some dreams you keep close, I said quietly, until you're ready to make them real. She crossed the room and kissed me, her hands still smelling of rosemary and thyme. I love watching you step into your power, Daniel Reeves. At 7 p.m. sharp, Professor Jenkins arrived, followed closely by Margaret and Mike. They mingled easily, connected by their shared appreciation for innovation and craftsmanship. Professor Jenkins proudly told stories about my student days, while Margaret shared her vision for how our partnership would evolve. Mike, looking slightly uncomfortable in business casual instead of his usual work clothes, nevertheless beamed with pride when I introduced him as the person who had taught me everything I knew about actual construction. Theory is one thing, Mike told Margaret, but Daniel here wanted to understand how buildings really come together. Most architects I work with couldn't drive a nail to save their lives. This guy can frame a house with the best of them. By 7:45, my family still hadn't arrived. I tried not to let it show as I refilled wine glasses and kept the conversation flowing. At 8:15, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Running late. Jackson's interview went long, and they asked him to do some photos. Should be there by 9. Save us some food. I looked at the carefully prepared meal, the thoughtfully selected wines, the people who had made time to celebrate my achievement. Something shifted inside me. Everything okay? Lisa asked quietly, noticing my expression. I showed her the text, then made a decision. Actually, yes. Everything is perfect. We sat down to dinner without waiting any longer. The conversation flowed naturally, filled with ideas, plans, and genuine interest in each other's perspectives. Professor Jenkins and Margaret debated the future of urban planning, while Mike offered practical insights about implementation challenges. Lisa shared her engineering expertise, suggesting innovations that could enhance my designs. It was the kind of intellectual feast I had always craved from family dinners, but never experienced. At 9:30, the doorbell finally rang. Lisa squeezed my hand under the table as I rose to answer it. My parents entered first, full of apologies and explanations. Jackson followed, still riding the high of his Sports Illustrated interview. "Sorry we're so late, honey," my mother gushed, air-kissing my cheek. "But wait until you hear about Jackson's photo shoot. They're putting him on the Rising Stars cover." I stepped back, taking in the scene. My family, arriving 90 minutes late to the most important celebration of my career, bursting through the door with more news about Jackson. But instead of the familiar sting, I felt something unexpected. Clarity. "Come in," I said calmly. "We've just finished dinner, but there's plenty left. Let me introduce you to everyone." I made the introductions, watching as my family struggled to adjust to a room full of accomplished professionals who had never heard of Jackson Reeves. "Margaret Chin is the CEO of Horizon Development," I explained. "They've just contracted me to design sustainable communities across the Southeast." Margaret stepped forward, shaking my father's hand firmly. "Your son is going to change how Americans think about residential living. We're projecting his first community will be featured in Architectural Digest next year." My father blinked, clearly reassessing the situation. That's remarkable. "And Mike here," I continued, "has been mentoring me on the construction side for years. He's going to be overseeing the building of my prototype." Mike nodded. "Your son has a gift. Best architect I've ever worked with, and I've been in construction for 30 years. I watched as my family tried to process this new reality, one where Daniel, the reliable but unremarkable son, was being celebrated by industry leaders. Where Daniel's work was described as revolutionary. Where Daniel was the center of attention. Jackson, unused to being in the background, quickly tried to reclaim the spotlight. "Well, I just signed with the Braves for $3.2 million, he announced to the room at large. "I'm going to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated next month." A brief, awkward silence followed. Then Professor Jenkins smiled kindly. "That's wonderful. My nephew is a huge Braves fan. Now, Daniel, tell us more about the community garden integration you were describing." That sounded fascinating. And just like that, the conversation moved on, leaving Jackson standing there with his announcement hanging in the air, unaddressed. I shouldn't have enjoyed the moment as much as I did. But watching my brother experience, for perhaps the first time in his life, what it felt like to be invisible, it was a small but significant reckoning. As the evening continued, I observed my family with newfound detachment. My father, struggling to participate in conversations about sustainable architecture and urban planning. My mother, realizing that her social currency in this room had nothing to do with her son, the baseball player. And Jackson, increasingly quiet as he came to understand that in this world, my world, his athletic prowess meant very little. When the party finally wound down near midnight, my guests departed one by one, each leaving with plans for future collaboration. Margaret with a meeting scheduled to review the first site plans. Professor Jenkins with an invitation to consult on the community education spaces. Mike with a handshake and a promise to meet at the site next week. Only my family remained, looking somewhat shell-shocked in my apartment that suddenly seemed to belong to a stranger. "Well," my mother finally said, "that was illuminating. I had no idea your work was so significant, Daniel." My father nodded slowly. "7 figures, you said? For the design contract." I couldn't help but smile at how quickly he had circled back to the money. "That's right. Plus equity in the developments and royalties for future implementations of my designs. So you could be making more than Jackson? Possibly. Over time." I said it without malice, just stating facts. "But that's not the point." "What is the point, then?" Jackson asked, and for the first time in years, I heard genuine curiosity in his voice. I thought for a moment, looking around my apartment at the blueprints and sketches that represented years of invisible work. At Lisa, who had always seen my potential. At the empty wine glasses left by people who valued my mind and my vision. The point is creating something meaningful. Something that outlasts you. Something that makes people's lives better. I met my brother's eyes directly. "No offense, Jackson, but in 30 years, no one will remember your batting average. But people will be living in communities I designed. Kids will be growing up in spaces that shape how they see the world, how they interact with their environment." My father frowned. "That sounds a bit self-important, don't you think?" "No," Lisa interjected firmly. "It sounds like someone who finally understands his own worth." My mother's eyes widened at Lisa's tone, but I squeezed her hand gratefully. "It's late," I said, suddenly tired of the whole dynamic. We all have busy days tomorrow. They took the hint, gathering their things with murmured thanks for the evening. At the door, Jackson paused. Hey, I meant what I said before. You should come see my new place once I get settled. Bring your blueprints or whatever. I'd like to understand this. He gestured vaguely around my apartment. It was the most genuine interest he'd shown in my life in years. I'd like that, I said, surprised to find I meant it. After they left, Lisa helped me clear the last of the dishes. So, she said casually, how does it feel? What? Being seen. Finally being acknowledged for who you really are. I considered the question as I rinsed a wine glass. It feels unnecessary. She raised an eyebrow. Unnecessary? The validation. The recognition. I realized something tonight. I turned to face her fully. I've been waiting for them to see me, to understand what I've built. But it doesn't matter if they see it or not. It exists. It's real. I'm real. Lisa smiled, leaning against the counter. That, Daniel Reeves, is what I call growth. I pulled her close, feeling more centered than I had in years. Tomorrow I'm going to call about that land by the river. I want to start designing our house. Our house, she repeated, searching my face. If you want. If you're ready for that. She kissed me instead of answering, which I took as a yes. Later, as we lay in bed, my phone buzzed with a text. From Jackson. Congrats again, bro. Sorry I've been self-absorbed. You're building something amazing. Proud of you. I stared at the message for a long moment, unexpected emotion tightening my throat. Then I typed back. Thanks, Jay. Proud of you too. And I was. Despite everything, despite the years of imbalance and invisibility, I was proud of my brother. His success wasn't less meaningful because it was different from mine. It had just taken up too much space for too long. But that was changing now. We were both carving out our places in the world. His under bright lights and roaring crowds. Mine in sustainable communities and innovative designs. Different paths. Different dreams. Both valid. I set my phone aside and closed my eyes, already envisioning the house by the river. Our house. The first of many buildings that would bear my name not just on the blueprints, but on the dedication plaques. The first space I would design not for clients or companies, but for myself. For the first time in my life, I was fully visible. Not just to my family or to Horizon Development, but to myself. And that, I was discovering, was the only recognition that truly mattered. Underscore 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 underscore. 6 months later, I stood on a hill overlooking the first Horizon community taking shape below. What had once been just lines on paper was now emerging from the Georgia clay. Foundations poured, frames rising, the careful integration of natural and built environments becoming visible. It's even more impressive in person, Lisa said beside me, her hand warm in mine despite the December chill. It's just the beginning, I replied, unable to keep the pride from my voice. Wait until you see what we're planning for the Tennessee site. The past months had been a whirlwind. My designs had been featured in Architectural Digest, just as Margaret had predicted. Sustainable Living publications had run profiles on my approach to community-centered design. Universities were requesting guest lectures. And Horizon was already talking about expanding our partnership to include commercial properties. Meanwhile, our house by the river was nearly complete, a showcase of every sustainable innovation I'd ever dreamed of implementing. Lisa and I would be moving in after the new year, embarking on a new chapter together. Behind us, car doors slammed, and I turned to see my family picking their way up the muddy hill to join us. Their visits to my work sites had become a monthly occurrence. Tentative at first, then with growing interest as they began to understand the scope of what I was creating. This is really coming along, my father said, surveying the construction below. After years of dismissing my career as secondary to Jackson's, he now had a subscription to Architectural Digest and regularly sent me articles about sustainable building practices. My mother linked her arm through mine. I still can't believe my son is designing entire communities. Wait until I tell the ladies at book club that the New York Times called you architecture's rising star. I smiled at her enthusiasm, which was genuine if still somewhat superficial. My mother would always be drawn to accolades and public recognition, but at least now she was finding them in my achievements too. Jackson, home during the baseball off-season, walked the perimeter of the hilltop, taking in the view. His first season with the Braves had been solid if not spectacular. Enough to secure his position, but not enough to make him the immediate star he'd expected to be. The humbling experience had changed him in subtle ways. He was less quick to center himself in every conversation, more interested in others' experiences, more thoughtful about his place in the world. So this curved section here, he called over, pointing to where the community center was taking shape, that's the solar collection area you were telling me about? That's right. I joined him at the edge of the hill. The angle maximizes sun exposure during winter months, while the overhang provides shade in summer. It will reduce the building's energy consumption by nearly 60%. Jackson nodded, genuinely interested. And these homes here, these are the ones with the garden roofs? Green roofs, I corrected. They provide insulation, absorb rainwater, and create habitats for birds and insects. Plus, homeowners can grow their own herbs and vegetables if they want. That's cool, he said simply. Then, after a pause, I was thinking about my condo in Atlanta. It's this glass and steel high-rise. Looks impressive, but it's an environmental disaster. Costs a fortune to heat and cool. I raised an eyebrow, waiting. I was wondering if you might. If you have time, maybe you could help me find something more like this? Or at least suggest some changes I could make. The request surprised me. 6 months ago, Jackson wouldn't have cared about his environmental footprint. Wouldn't have asked for my professional opinion about anything. I'd be happy to, I said. Actually, there's a renovated warehouse loft downtown that was retrofitted with sustainable systems. Might be more your style than out here in the suburbs. He brightened. That sounds perfect. Maybe we could check it out next week? I'm in town until spring training starts. Sure, I agreed. And maybe you can show me around the Braves training facility sometime. I've never seen it up close. Seriously? You'd want to see that? Of course, I said, meaning it. That's your world. I'd like to understand it better. Something shifted in Jackson's expression, relief, maybe, or recognition. For so long, we had been competitors in a game neither of us had designed, vying for attention and validation that should have been freely given to both of us. Now we were just brothers. Different. Equal. Deal, he said, offering his hand. I shook it, feeling a connection that had been missing for too many years. My mother called us over to where she and my father were standing with Lisa. We have something for you, she said, reaching into her purse. A housewarming gift for the River House. She handed me a small box wrapped in simple blue paper. I opened it to find a bronze plaque, small enough to mount beside a door. It read, The Reeves House. Designed by Daniel Reeves, architect. Built on dreams and determination. I ran my thumb over the engraved letters, unexpectedly moved. Thank you, I said quietly. This means a lot. My father cleared his throat. We're proud of you, son. We always have been. We didn't understand what you were building. Not really. We do now, my mother added, squeezing my arm. And it's magnificent. I looked from the plaque to my family, then out over the community taking shape below us. My design. My vision. Being built not just in steel and concrete, but in the changing relationships around me. In the newfound respect in my father's eyes. In the genuine interest from my brother. In the pride my mother now took in my work. Let's head back to the city, I suggested. I want to show you the latest plans for the Tennessee site. As we walked down the hill toward our cars, Lisa fell into step beside me. Look at you, she said softly. The visible architect. I smiled, understanding exactly what she meant. For the first time in my life, I was fully seen by my family, by my industry, and most importantly, by myself. And the view from here was beautiful.